Chapter 6 Understanding Leads to Resolution. Throughout this book, we have indicated that conflicts are inevitable. There are no marriages without conflicts. However, conflicts need not be divisive. If you choose a win-win attitude and you are sincerely listening to your spouse, you will come to understand what he or she is thinking, feeling, and desiring. You will also discover why your spouse has these opinions and how strong these opinions are. With this information, you are now in a position to resolve conflicts in a positive manner. You are ready to ask the question, how can we resolve this conflict so that both of us feel loved and appreciated? The answer to this question will lead to positive resolutions. By asking this question, you are not demanding your own way, and you are not seeking to manipulate your spouse into agreeing with you. You are seeking to find a resolution that will make both of you and your spouse feel good. A husband and a wife who understand and love each other can focus on finding a mutually agreeable solution rather than condemning each other. They are friends, not enemies. Together, they will find a positive solution. Typically, resolutions fall into one of three categories: meeting in the middle, meeting on one side, or meeting later. Meeting in the middle. In this approach, the couple finds a solution approximately halfway between each of their original desires. Both spouses gives up some of what they want, and both also gain some of what they want. Some people call this approach reaching a compromise. However, a compromise focuses on what parties have to give up. I prefer to focus on what they have gained. Meeting in the middle communicates to me that both parties have agreed on a solution that they feel is mutually loving and beneficial. I met John and Brenda in Mobile, Alabama. They approached me after a seminar, and John said very excitedly, "This is our second time to attend your seminar. We attended last year when you were in Montgomery, and today we brought 6 couples from our church. We found it so helpful that we wanted to expose them to your teaching." "Give me a specific example of how you found this seminar helpful," I said. Here's the story they shared with me. John and Brenda knew that their old car, which had 215,000 miles on it, would soon need to be replaced. John wanted to buy a new car, and Brenda wanted to buy a used one. They realized that they had a conflict over the issue one night when John came home and said, "I stopped by the Buick place today and priced some new cars." "Why did you do that?" Brenda said. "We can't afford a new car." "New cars are not much more expensive than used ones," John said. "Besides, they are much more reliable. If not, we get a late model used car that has a warranty," said Brenda. "I don't want to buy someone else's junk," said John. "I'm not talking about junk. I'm talking about finding a good, low-mileage used car," said Brenda. With extra exchanges of words, the volume of their responses increased. When John realized that they were screaming at each other, he said, "I do believe that we have a conflict." I seem to remember hearing something about conflict resolution in the seminar we attended last month. Maybe we need to pull out our notes and see what was said. "Better yet," Brenda said, "I've just finished reading the book, The 4 Seasons of Our Marriage. There's a chapter in there on empathetic listening. I remember thinking as I read, that's a chapter we need to discuss with each other." "I don't want us to get into a conflict over whether we should read the chapter or look at the notes," John said, smiling. "So why don't you review the chapter and I'll review the notes, and tomorrow night we'll share what we learned about conflict resolution. I'm sure we're not the only ones who have wrestled with this topic, and I certainly don't think either one of us wants to get into a fight over this." "Good idea," said Brenda, "but I don't want us to get ourselves in debt and do something we can't afford to do." "I think we both agree on that," John said. "Obviously, we don't agree on the question of new car versus used car, but as smart as we are, I'm sure we can figure it out." He reached out and gave Brenda a hug. "Okay," I said. "I can't wait to hear how you resolve the conflict." Brenda spoke first. "Well, first we shared with each other some of the key ideas we had learned about how to listen. Then we tried to apply them in our situation. After we listened to each other, I realized that John had always wanted to have a new car. He had driven used cars all his life, and had a number of experiences where he missed appointments and was inconvenienced by car troubles. And I learned, John said, that Brenda was genuinely concerned about our finances. I didn't realize that she was living under so much pressure. That was one of the good things that came out of our listening to each other. Growing up, her dad had always bought reliable used cars and she never remembered a car breaking down. I guess my experience was with older cars that weren't very reliable. So how did you finally resolve the conflict, I asked. After a lot of listening, John said, and checking several options, we decided not to buy a car at all. I'm sure John saw the puzzled look on my face because he smiled as he continued. We decided to lease a new car for 3 years. The monthly payments were just about the same, said Brenda, and it was a payment that we both felt we could live with, John continued. At the end of 3 years, we hope to be in a better financial position, and then we can revisit the issue of buying a new car or a used car. John and Brenda illustrate a positive approach to resolving conflicts by meeting in the middle. John got a new car, and Brenda got a monthly payment that she felt they could afford. Both ended up feeling good about the resolution, and both felt loved and affirmed by each other. Many conflicts can be resolved by this meeting in the middle approach to conflict resolution. Meeting on one side. This approach involves the same process of empathetic listening and affirming each other's ideas and feelings as meeting in the middle, but the final resolution is made by one spouse choosing to meet the other on the other spouse's side. Betty and Mark illustrate this approach to conflict resolution. They came to my office because they had been arguing for 3 months over Betty's desire to go back and finish her undergraduate college degree. She had dropped out of college after junior year when she and Mark got married. They had moved across the country at the request of his employer. Now, 9 years later, they were back in their hometown. Mark had a good job, and they had 2 children, the youngest of whom had just started first grade. Betty now felt that this was an ideal time for her to go back and finish her degree. Mark felt strongly that for Betty to go back to school would be a waste of time, energy, and money. I'm making all the money we need, he said. She doesn't need to go back and get her degree. She doesn't really want to work anyway, so what's the purpose in getting a degree? The kids need help with their homework, and I don't really have time to do that. It's going to put a lot of pressure on our family. He doesn't understand how important it is for me to finish my degree, Betty said. All my brothers and sisters finished college, and I'm the only one who doesn't have a degree. It will only take 1 year, and I can still help the children with their homework. Besides, Mark could help if he were willing to give up a little TV. It was obvious to me that Betty and Mark not only had a conflict, but also had spent considerable time arguing and were now at the point of throwing barbs at each other. It took a number of counseling sessions to help them come to respect each other's desires and treat each other with dignity and love. Eventually, they learned to listen to each other empathetically. Mark was finally able to say, I understand why it is so important for Betty to get her degree. I guess I was looking only at the financial side and the impact it would have on our family. I was not looking at her emotional need to finish her degree. I realized that I was self-centered and not willing to sacrifice in order to help her reach that goal. I have decided to support her enthusiastically in getting her degree. We've turned it into a family project. The kids are excited about it, and I realize now that this is going to have a positive effect on them. I hope that seeing Betty go back to finish her degree will motivate them to want to graduate from college themselves someday. How does this make you feel, Betty? I asked. I feel very loved and affirmed by Mark, she said. I'm sorry it took us so long to get there, but I think that he genuinely understands my desire. I really appreciate his love and support. I think it's going to make our marriage much stronger. Mark and Betty's conflict was resolved by his choice to meet on one side. In this case, hers. The process of empathetic listening led them to understanding, and understanding led to a resolution they both agreed on. The conflict was no longer a barrier. It was genuinely resolved by Mark's choice to meet Betty on her side. Many conflicts can be resolved by this positive approach. Meeting later. A third approach to resolving conflict is meeting later. In this approach, a couple cannot honestly find a place to meet in the middle, nor can one spouse consciously move to the other side. Therefore, they agree to disagree. With respect and love, this approach may resolve a conflict temporarily or permanently, depending on the nature of the disagreement. First, I'll illustrate how this approach works as a temporary resolution. It is almost midnight on Tuesday. Brad and Renee have been arguing for the past 2.5 hours about whether he should go fishing at the end of the month with a group of guys from work. Brad really wants to go. He feels it is important for building rapport with his coworkers and that it would be good for him in terms of job security and possible promotion. Renee is resisting the idea because her perception is that most of Brad's coworkers are not the kind of guys he should be hanging out with. Half of them are unfaithful to their wives, she says, and almost all of them drink in excess. I just don't think it's a healthy climate. It's well past their usual bedtime and both of them are fatigued. Their arguments have gotten them nowhere and they now have a decision to make. Either they can continue to argue throughout the night and both face the new day emotionally and physically drained, or they can call a truce, acknowledging that the conflict is not resolved but that both of them need a break. In short, they can agree to disagree temporarily. In essence, they are saying to each other, we know this conflict is not resolved, but because it's late and we're both tired, we're going to put it on the shelf and agree that we will pick it up again tomorrow, or at some other agreed upon time. In the meantime, we will both give thought to how we might approach this issue in a more constructive manner, and we agree not to throw any more bombs at each other. They have agreed to a truce, and they both know that the truce is temporary. If Brad and Renee do not learn to listen empathetically and seek to understand each other before they sit down to talk again, their next session may be as frustrating and unproductive as the last one, and the resolution may still elude them. However, if they do learn how to listen empathetically and understand each other's desires, they might create a much warmer atmosphere in their relationship. Through empathetic listening, they will learn to appreciate each other's point of view, even if they still honestly disagree. Instead of arguing, they'll now be able to express respect and love for each other. Renee may not be able to bring herself to meet Brad on his side, and Brad may be equally unable to meet Renee on her side, but they still can communicate amicably with each other. This means they will not treat each other harshly or allow distance to come between them. They will go on with life in a positive way, realizing that they simply have a conflict that is not yet resolved. Sooner or later, of course, before the end of the month, they must move to a solution. If they fail to meet in the middle or meet on one side, the day for fishing trip will arrive and Brad will either go or stay at home. If he stays at home with resentment towards Renee, it will show up in his behavior and the unresolved conflict will have a detrimental effect on their relationship. If he goes on the fishing trip without regard to Renee's thoughts and feelings, hurt and anger will be revealed by her behavior and the relationship will be damaged. Therefore, in this illustration, the decision to meet later is only a temporary solution that requires additional empathetic listening and understanding. In other cases, the decision to meet later or to agree or to disagree can be a permanent resolution of a conflict. For example, Nina and Tyler have a conflict over toothpaste. She is a middle squeezer and he squeezes from the bottom. From the first year of their marriage, they exchanged friendly but frank objections to the other way they squeezed the tube. Eventually, they got around to talking about it with some level of openness. Now they both agree that from the engineer's perspective, squeezing from the bottom made more sense. But from the perspective of Nina's quirky personality, always squeezing from the bottom was a discipline that seemed impossible for her to learn. Neither Nina nor Tyler seemed able to consistently squeeze the way the other desired. Instead, they agreed to buy 2 tubes of toothpaste and let both of them squeeze the way they pleased. This solution will work fine for a lifetime until they discover the pump. They agreed to disagree, and neither had any animosity towards the other. They were simply no longer irritated by the other's behavior. They found a mutually satisfactory solution in choosing to agree to disagree. Many of the common conflicts experienced in the early years of marriage can be resolved by agreeing to disagree. I remember that when Carolyn and I first married, we argued numerous times over how to properly load the dishwasher. I contended and still do that if you place all things together, plates with plates, cups with cups, and so on, they will come out cleaner and be less likely to get broken in the dishwasher. Carolyn argued that such organization was a waste of time. Dishwashers are designed to wash whatever's in them, no matter how or where the dishes are placed. After many months of arguing, we were left with anger and resentment. When we finally learned to listen empathetically and sought to understand each other, rather than seeking to win the argument, we ultimately agreed to disagree. The practical solution was that when Carolyn loaded the dishwasher, she could load it her way, and when I loaded the dishwasher, I could load it my way. Because I was the one who unloaded the dishwasher every morning, I agreed to clean the spoons that had been cradled together with peanut butter between them and to occasionally toss a broken glass into the trash. It was a small price to pay for marital harmony, and this solution has served us well for 40 years. Most conflicts can be resolved by meeting in the middle, meeting on one side, or meeting later. Conflict resolution is much easier when we feel understood and loved, and when we have reached the decision without coercion. We realize that we are on the same team and working together to use our ideas, desires, and emotions to reach a win-win solution to our conflicts. Each of these 3 patterns of conflict resolution requires empathetic listening, understanding, loving attitudes, and an openness to change. The reason that many couples do not resolve conflicts is that they never learn to follow the process of listening, understanding, and loving. But listening, understanding, and loving is what creates a climate for mutually satisfying conflict resolution. Putting the principles into practice. 1. Memorize this question and use it with your spouse next time you have a conflict. How can we resolve this conflict so that both of us feel loved and appreciated? 2. In this chapter, we discussed 3 positive ways of resolving conflicts: meeting in the middle, meeting on one side, meeting later. Did you use any of these strategies in resolving a recent conflict? Did you and your spouse both feel loved and appreciated? 3. Can you think of an illustration where meeting later or agreeing to disagree became a permanent solution to one of your conflicts? Or, in your opinion, how well are you and your spouse doing in reaching win-win resolutions? What do you need to change or continue in order to improve?